Hello everybody, thanks for joining me again. Today we're going to be taking a look at making a sort of simple foresty kick drum sound. So before we get started, just wanted to say that obviously there are more or less an unlimited different types of kick drum that can work in any genre. This is just one of them. Okay, so we're going to try to make something similar to this. Okay, and just on its own. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need is a new MIDI channel with our kick MIDI and an instance of Kick2. Okay, and then just going to get utility and -10, just so we don't get any ridiculously loud kick drums happening. Okay, so firstly, we're going to make sure all the clicks are silent. Going to turn off the EQ. Turn off the distortion, we can leave the drive alone though. And I'm going to set the maximum pitch to around about 5-6K. This is kind of, everything in this is going to be quite subjective, tweak it to your own taste. But yeah, so I'll set it around about 5K, and I'm going to set the length to around 200. I don't always follow any particular formula or rules when I make kick drums. It's just for the sake of this video, I'm going to do specific things. Okay, and then I'm just going to get rid of those nodes. Okay, and then make sure my first node is right at the top. My last node, I'm probably going to have it hit around sort of 30 to 40 hertz area. Maybe 34 hertz or something. That might sound too low to some of you, but we're not actually ever going to get a resting tone of 34 hertz by doing that, so don't worry about that. Okay, so then let's pop into the amp section and let's make a shape something like this. Okay, so we're kind of going for this fish-like shape. So it should have a peak at the start, go down, and then have some body, and then wake its way back down again. I'm gonna add a couple more points. Probably something like that. Okay, and then something like that. Okay, so this is all something that we can tweak as we go, because we can think of the amp envelope as kind of the EQ, really, because there's only ever one frequency playing at a time. So if we are making different parts of the sweep louder or quieter, then we're kind of EQing them out, if you like. Okay, so and also if you're wondering why we've gone for this shape and why you often see this shape in kick drums, it's for two reasons. So firstly, by having this dip happen, we can get rid of a lot of those sort of boxy, muddy, mid-range frequencies, and also we can kind of trick the ear into thinking the sound is louder than it really is, and carve a transient into a sound that would otherwise have a complete lack of dynamics. So to continue, let's pop back over to the pitch, and yeah, if we were to just listen to this on its own, it's probably not going to sound great. So usually what I'll do is just tweak this. So I'll press play and I'll bring this curve down until I find a point where it sounds sort of closest to what I'm aiming for. Okay, so there's a wide variety of timbres available to you, but really what kind of matters is whether it works in the context. So it can be quite easy to make kicks that sound really nice in isolation, but when you play them in the context, maybe not sound so good. But then again, also there is the fact that some kicks will just sound good in one track and not sound so good in another. So often it can be quite useful if you are making this kick for a specific track to play the bass line alongside it. So let's do that. Yep, that's definitely going the right direction. Sounds alright. So from here, Usually I'll probably place a node somewhere along the middle of this line. So for example, let's make a node about 200 Hertz, and just so you can hear the effect, let's sweep it left and right so we can get a bit more lasery or zappy kick by going to the right. And if we go to the left, we get a more sort of hollow kick, which might seem like you lose a lot of the body, but again, in certain context, it might work quite nicely with like a particularly dark bass line or something. So let's say we're actually pretty much happy with where that node is. Let's go ahead and deal with some of these upper frequencies. So usually I'll make a node somewhere around 1000 Hertz. And typically I will bring this over towards the left, but it really depends on what style of kick you're going for, because if you want it to have that more of a almost kiss-like quality to it, the sort of long transient, then you can bring it to the right. And if you prefer more of a sort of snappy click, then you can bring it to the left. And just so you can hear those things. Okay, so we could sit here kind of endlessly tweaking this, but for the sake of the video, obviously I can't do that. But yeah, let's say we're happy with that. On a sort of side note, I will usually spend multiple sessions on any one kick, making version after version after version, and just, constantly coming back to it with fresh ears and seeing if I really think it sounds that good, making small changes, and then compare. Because it's very easy with kick and bass, as you probably know, to make something that might seem good at the time, and then you hear it again and it's maybe not quite right. So yeah, definitely make sure you give yourself time to just come back with a fresh perspective and fresh eardrums. Okay, so to continue, let's just keep tweaking this sort of high and mid area. Let's tweak this curve here. So I quite like it slightly curved down, gives it a bit less going on in that sort of 2-3K area, which is nice in my opinion. Just kind of makes it feel a bit more snappy. And let's go and deal with this mid-range. So we can just keep on adding more and more nodes if we want. I would say that usually my favorite kicks of mine are the ones where I have the fewest nodes. So I just think they tend to sound a bit cleaner. But of course, you can go crazy and experiment. But I'm just going to tweak this curve and then potentially put in another node. Okay, so there's qualities I like about pushing it up and qualities I like about pushing it down, so I am going to put a node in. Let's put it around about 500 Hertz or so. Would you look at that? Perfect, 500 Hertz. Right, and then let's try and curve this area down between 500 and 200 Hertz, so we're sweeping faster through that mid-range. Okay, subtle difference, but I think I prefer it there anyway. And then let's play with this curve here. And let's just say we're happy with that. Now let's have a play with this curve. So this last curve is going to make a huge difference to the way your kick appears to be. So, you know, we can make it more of a heavy, low range kick, or we can make it be more of a boomy, higher kick. This is the part that makes the big difference. Let's just hear it on its own for the moment. So yeah, as you can hear, depending on how we make this curve, it can make it much more of a sort of bodyful, higher energy kick, or more of a deep, heavy kick. So depending on the type of style you're going for and the key and BPM and whatnot you're in, you will be able to use this curve to get what it is you want. Okay, so I'm just going to go for what I think sounds right with this bass line. Okay, so I quite like the way that sounds with that bass line. So now we can sort of move on to final tweaks for the pitch. So we can do a couple of things with Kick2 to get it to really fit well with the bass line. One of them, for example, is you would have seen I'm just pressing this phase invert button here just to get it sort of matching as well as possible to the bass line. That's quite a nice feature of Kick2 because we can just flip it over and, you know, if it is out of phase by enough, then that will kind of help quite a lot. Another way to deal with this is to move your last node, or you can create an early node that happens just before your first node, which you can kind of tweak a bit to get some phase shifting going on. But playing with the nodes like that is going to change the sound of your kick, so just be aware of that. Okay, so I suppose my point is that the kick sounding as good as possible is more important than getting really good phase relationship or whatever, because we can do things outside of Kick2 to help with the phase relationship. Or, you know, even potentially you could use this kick elsewhere in a different track or something. Anyhow, so let's, just for the sake of it, let's play around with this last note just a tiny bit. So yeah, I think on the whole, it sort of sounded best where we had it originally. Let's just leave it like that. Okay, now let's pop over to our amp. So here we can now choose the character and sort of spectral qualities of our kick. Usually, I'll move between the pitch and the amp envelopes and just sort of tweak one, then tweak the other, tweak one, then tweak the other until I'm kind of getting what I'm happy with. We're not going to do that though, because the video will end up being very, very long. Okay, so let's start over at the transient of our kick. So this first curve, we're going to be able to bring in or take away the initial click of our kick drum. Okay, let's say we're happy with something like that. This first node, we can move it left or right, depending on what we want the character of the transient to be like. So if you like it to be more of a higher end snap at the beginning of the kick, then you can move it to left. Or if you prefer it to be more of a woody or dark texture, then you can move it over to the right. And just so you can see what that would sound like. Okay, I'm just going to say that I like it where it was. Then with this curve here, we can kind of decide how much of the mids are going to happen in the transient. Okay, let's say we're happy with it like that. Then these two nodes, we're going to be able to control how much of the mids happen, like I explained earlier. I'm just going to leave them alone. But if you wanted to have a bit more mid-range going on, it's a pretty easy thing to just pull these up. But I'm just going to leave them alone for the moment. Okay, so and then also this curve here between the two, you can get a little bit extra control, just how deep the notch goes. Okay, so then we have this curve here. This one's actually pretty important. So you can completely change the character of your kick with this curve. If you want it to appear a bit more kind of boomy and a bit more that 100 hertz area-ish or so, then you're going to want to curve this outwards, so towards the left. And if you want it to have sort of less of that stuff going on generally, then you can pull it to the right. So just so you can hear what that would sound like. Let's have it on its own. So yeah, if you put it to the left, you get like more of like a thuddy, boxy kick, which you might like, particularly for sort of like more high energy tracks, maybe higher key. That can work quite nicely, I think. And if you put it the other way, you get kind of like a, what I would say, like a deeper feeling kick. Okay, so let's go with something like that. And then I tend to just leave this curve up here alone, really. We can edit it if we want. It can act as a bit of an EQ for us. If there is frequencies going on here that you kind of want to dull down a little bit, but I'm not going to mess with that for this kick. Okay, and then this final curve is going to dictate what the tail of the kick is like. So quite often it can be very tempting to just bend this outwards, so you get a really, really fat tail, and a really nice fat, loud low end going on, but in context, it's not always the best thing to do, especially if your kick goes quite low in pitch. Sometimes having it be quite loud down there just gives way too much sub presence to the track. So yeah, be careful with this. I'm just gonna play it with the bass line and make my mind up. Okay, and I'm going to say that I'm just happy with it like that. Okay, so one last note on the amp envelope. You can have the length of your kick be whatever you want, and just use the amp envelope to shorten it. For example, pop a node there, and then you could just shorten it. It's really up to you how you do it, and depending on the context of your track, etc., etc. So do what you think is right. And don't be afraid as well to use longer lengths than you think you might need. I've had some really nice kicks from using, over a second in length. I found that the curves somehow act more smoothly at the longer lengths. Anyways, so yeah, just experiment and see what you think. Okay, so that's pretty much it. As a final thing, what I might do is add a bit of EQ, and in here potentially pull out some more mids or something like that. Just something that I couldn't do what I wanted to in the amp envelope. Let's just have a little sweep and see if we can find anything we want to get rid of. And maybe sometimes cutting some highs off can... but again, that's just really a taste thing and depends on the kick that you're working on. Okay, so yeah, let's say we're happy with that. Then what you could do is render from here, generate, and either click and drag or export from there. But not that it really matters that much, but just so you know, if you do export from this render page, it will be a 16-bit file rather than 24 or whatever. So I do tend to record them from the Kick2's output rather than exporting them from here. It doesn't really matter that much, and you probably will never notice the difference, but I just like to keep things all in 24-bit. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully you've learned something about Kick2, and hopefully you like the kick that I've made, and hopefully this video will help you to make kicks that you like too. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. If you want to support me, you can join the Discord, support me through Patreon, or check out my Gumroad. Okay, all this stuff is linked in the description. And otherwise, thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time.